Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 8 and Third Reich events installed. Let's get going with the war here. Yes, I'm bringing in Croatia. Just hopefully they'll use their minor air force here to some good. Officially have more enemies of the Allies. Okay, we have even more things we can build. Right now adding a few more infantry divisions to the production queue. But still like some inputs, some ideas on what you think might be a good idea to use. And we will do some more bombers, I think. Mediums. So we finally got one of those ports built into there, which will increase the supply throughput here. Let's put up okay. 10, 1. Any personnel defenses for the armor, and the seaport capabilities. That should also help. With the supply situation. Okay, now that they're surrounded, let's attack them. So hopefully we will eliminate them. And what does Croatia want? Oh, some Messerschmitts. Okay, you can build some Messerschmitts, that's fine. These guys are about dead. We're going to withdraw them from the combat. What are we doing here? Okay, I guess. Well, we need to do some more stuff. At least switch that over. There we go. And direct fire unit. I haven't fought enough battles yet for those. Maybe a couple of submarines. Well, we've lost very high popularity, unfortunately, there. Heroic Tales, good. New Battle Commander would be nice. Their bases, yeah. 20th Gerbs Armee Commando. 20th Gerbs Lapland Army, okay. Some of those were already there. Okay. Now, we'll move him up to here, I think. But yeah. So, yeah, those are all various occupation forces. Don't know what I'm going to do with this army because we already have Finland command here. Give us a general. No, good. So would have pulled off a general from some other assigned position. Okay, well. A few more police divisions, I think. No. Bye. Just more police brigades than divisions. Help us control India and such places, and I think we'll also do 3 regiments to attach to garrison brigades. And with that, we still haven't used up good. We haven't used up all of our. Just a little worried about the manpower situation if I keep building ground units. Because once we get into the Soviet War, we're going to have a fair amount of attrition there. Let's build a couple of more transports. Those aren't manpower intensive, but they do cost us high seas. Let's see if we have marine. These guys help them out. Yes. Okay, now the effect has hit us. We've lost the small, but gained standard heroic tails, more territorial pride, national unity increased by a little bit, and organization rate regained. That's great. Rebuild these guys. We must have had some losses, so... Yep. U-boat pens in Bergen is constructed. Okay, that's up here. So we can decide not to do that. 8,000 supplies, not bad. Energy, I don't really care about that more than I can do with. Okay, shipyard. Oh, the shipyard's nice. And naval base, okay. And so yes, we want to do the Bergen. U-boats, death of Dr. Tote. Now, who is currently? Okay, yes, currently we do have Tote in there, and he's 5% plus ICs, crude oil 2%, resources 5% overall, and construction practical delays minus 5%. Point someone else. No, we want Spear. Okay, so yes. We want to die. He died in a airplane crash, I believe. And let's see. So we lose organ either way. We'll lose. Well, points that we'll lose someone one way or another. But okay. Lose one of descent. But we got a lot of minor advances, so we'll go with that. Panzer Army Africa. Okay. I've been sort of kind of waiting for that, and it didn't really happen as soon as I would have liked. Oh. Bummer. Okay, well. No leader for the moment. And how... We'll put Normal back in charge here. Did that to that, which I didn't like, but okay. Now I need a... transports. Go pick these guys up. But I wanted that. Militia, Resents Field Regiment, okay. Okay, not bad. Be useful. I don't know how much of a Panzer army that is in the sense of Field Erzat Regiment, but... And so now we have Speer, which 5% ICs. And the way I looked at that before was obviously the personality of Tote, but also organization Tote was in operation. Now we have Reich Architect Albert Speer in command as Armaments Minister, but he also replaces Tote as head of Organization Tote. And the difference is a couple of things. The Armaments Minister, both as sort of the slot in the game here, and historically, obviously built armaments, tanks, artillery rounds, aircraft, whatever. They were the administration for building for war production. Organization Tote developed, formed, and building the Autobahn project, and really sort of solidified with building the West Wall, and continued into building the Atlantic Wall and the U-boat pens. U-boat pens are sort of a little bit more before the Atlantic Wall. Early on, they weren't really that worried about a British invasion because they knew that Britain if they landed on France, it would have been like the suicide invasions that the AI used to do until that was fixed. And sure, you know, sort of like a bigger Dieppe raid. Eventually, you know, they get slaughtered by the Wehrmacht. It wasn't until the U.S. was in the war and things weren't going well in both the Soviet Union and the Mediterranean that they realized that the Americans could invade from Britain, and you know, the Germans never really understood the ability that the British and the Americans, it was both, with Canadian help as well, developed for the invasion of Europe. They saw what was going on in the Mediterranean, which was much more limited scale, and they saw or thought they needed significant ports to supply the a mechanized invasion, and you did, but when they operated down here with some of their invasions at Salerno, right around here, I guess. I think it's more here. They landed units across the beaches and brought supplies in across the beaches, but they did need to take like Palermo and other ports eventually to be able to sustain that. But they were also fighting on a limited front, like sort of like the idea that, you know, when we invaded Sri Lanka here, there wasn't the ready ability to pour in additional divisions. They did obviously pour in some to deal with it, but still it was much more limited field of operations. And I think they understood that, oh yes, you know, obviously, well, where's... Yep. Invade into Dieppe, small port, supplies there. But all you're going to do is create a pocket, and it's going to hold. It isn't going to be able to, you know, that you can supply through, like we're facing a supply problem down here. You're seeing with all these ports, I can't even supply. Well, I'm just now barely able to supply what we're needed to. And the Germans saw this and realized that they aren't stupid. Trust me on this. And yeah, you land here. You could try to battle to here, which you get more, and you know, that's what they're calling Cannes here, but the sort of Normandy coast where they landed. There were and are sort of little ports, but they're like fishing ports. You can't get a ship into them. I don't even wonder about Le Havre and Dieppe's ability to get ships in. Don't know the ports well. Cherbourg is a bit bigger port. Brest, very big and significant ports, and you get over here, you get much more significant ports. And the amount of shipping that it takes, because the Germans realize that trying to bring ships out around here, it's going to be costly with a lot of air power, because you're going to have to fly air power over. And, you know, and, you know, like when Stalin wanted, you know, European invasions in 42 and not the North Africa stuff, or 43, the Allies hadn't won the air war really enough to be able to do longer range invasions. It's one thing taking off of your bases here and trying to dominate this region to be able to land. It's another thing to operate down into here and not just, oh, we have a invasion flotilla with battleships and a few carriers and lots and lots of troop ships and transports and other things coming in here and landing. You got to keep ships every day coming around here and then going back, getting supplies. And just as the Germans saw it and realized and knew, it was fairly impractical to do. as time went on, obviously, it became more and more practical as Germany was losing the air war. But even once the invasions here, this can is sort of here, a lot of the invasions were beaches right around here. They still thought that to a degree. They didn't realize how much the Allies, they just, in my opinion, didn't have a clue to build the mobile ports, to build the or the idea of having all the extra ships that were set up to sink, to create breakwaters, and all of that to support the invasion, to keep it from being just a you know, everybody, you know, on the beaches here and being strangled for supplies. And if you just hold out with, you know, good garrison divisions, you're sort of trapping and limiting them. The Allies built that the ability to supply impromptu ports that really shocked the Germans, and I don't even know how much they even understood as the war went on. And you can look at the Cherbourg Peninsula as the port here held out for a while, and then later the Brest garrison held out for a long time. This was partly the Hitlerite idea of never surrendering, always holding ground, feeling that the, you know, the German spirit will overcome, and it's just giving up too early is the defeatism, is why we're losing. We're not losing because we're losing because we've lost heart. If we just had the heart, we will win kind of ideas. Those are, I've stripped the fighters away, so we're no longer operating these guys. So that if you just fought a little harder, we'll win kind of thing, and not giving up here. Well, the idea of tying up troops that will allow, you know, the wonderful panzer factories to build huge numbers of panzers, and we'll just flood them, or whatever the idea. And if we give up too soon, they'll just come in and take the factories. Well, they were losing because they were losing, not because they didn't have the will to fight. It's just the situation. So that you have to look at in terms of that for Germany's buildup and the relevance of defending the coastline here, because Germany knew it had a major army. It was just, unfortunately, for defending the West, it was tied up here. Now, we're going to face that same situation in the sense that we're going to have to defeat the Soviets and not be bogged down in the Soviets once the Allies get their invasion together. So it took them a while to really get the idea that they had to build the Atlantic Wall to make it very significant. Because if you looked at with Rommel before he became in charge, they had been building Atlantic Wall, some of the large batteries that actually shelled Dover region. With Organization Todt, they were doing some of that, but they were securing the ports primarily, because put a few panzer or armored corps around here, and they're just going to run out of gas. They're going to be armored pillboxes that sit there, and someone will run, some guy will carry couple of 5-gallon cans off the beaches, theoretic, obviously a little bit more than that, but pour 5 gallons in each tank, and they'll be able to reposition their pillbox a little bit. It won't be an armored thrust, is what they saw. So they were going to hold out the ports. Well, Rommel realized, after facing the Allied air power here, and realized and like I said, I'm very sure that didn't quite get the scale of building and construction going on for the mobile ports, but still the air power and what it would do to try to fight under air that are dominated by the enemy. And so he realized that if they get ashore here with air power, they will be able to punch through to some port, whether it's here, like Boulogne has or had a port, and they were, I think, silting up. I don't know how bad they were for in the Napoleonic era that were setting up for the invasion of Britain, but it wasn't a port that would handle shipping. It was narrow channels. I'm picturing it in my mind, what we'd think of fishing boats or sailing boats kind of thing, getting in and out. Yeah, so that if the Allies were to land here, they would be able to push to a port like Dunkirk or Dieppe, because their air power would keep the Germans from effectively reinforcing, tying up troops, trying to get into a counterattack. Would also be very strong mobile artillery elements, so that and all the beach defenses would be near useless when attacked from the flanks. So it was really with Rommel's era, and realized Rommel moved from North Africa, being sick, then being put in charge of northern Italy, and setting that up. That was just sort of a placeholding position for him while the action was going down here in Sicily and southern Italy. And it was only later that he was put in charge of the Atlantic Wall region here, and his organization Todt continued to build. And then Organization Todt continued to build in Germany as well. Franz Xavier Schwarz here was this guy here, or Deutsch, not Schwarz, Xavier Deutsch. Schwarz is Xavier Schwarz is another NSDAP figure. He was in charge of the building both the U-boat pen projects and the Atlantic Wall. The construction element of it, not the defense element or setting up the requirements of what you needed, as in, how many bunkers or whatever. He was just the guy managing the production element at the time. And there, they were continuing to build in Germany. I believe they were a lot of the people responsible for building things like the flak towers, expanding the rocket factories. And then later in the war, once the bombing was happening, they were building some of the underground factories. They were somewhere in here, an underground ME-262 factory under a hill that was designed to bring in the fairly rawish materials, do the construction elements of the jets, and then take them to the top of the hill, which they were building a runway right on, sort of a longish hill, and not a pointy one, but a sort of flat, longish one, that they were setting up to a runway to take them off from there. So it was sort of an isolated area in Germany that they built for production, and sort of in a bomb-proof factory idea for 262s. So that's what Organization Todt was doing. And Todt himself was also managing, military production. So when you get Speer involved in it, he had been Reich architect, had been doing construction projects that did involve some elements of Todt, as well as the NSKK for doing not just in Berlin, but heavily in Berlin. But as the war went on, those projects, and especially by the time the start of the Soviet Union, he realized that for the rest of the war, all of his projects were being ceased into production. They were in stages, slowed down production to stop. The grand stadium that they were building, and you've seen other events. So he shifted his workforce that was still around, and a fair amount of his laborers had already been shifted to various tote construction projects, but he still sort of had a core, I believe, of architects, and you know how the Nazis, they grow departments and grow people. So a lot of core of those people, which were sort of doing nothing really, and it's, I think, a fairly small core. Shifted them into helping managing organization Todt, which continued to work with Reichswehr Hermann Göring. If you so choose, you can put Göring back in charge of it, which will get his stuff, but it's not as good as Speer. But it still existed. It just, with the way this is set up, Reichswehr Hermann Göring still exists here with Göring as chief of the Air Force, because that's these 5% resources here that you're seeing. With him here, it's just he's not in charge. One of the main elements of Reichswehr Hermann Göring was to expand mines and expand resource productions. So you still have a little bit of that here. You still have a little bit of that here. And so Speer was put in charge of all this. Now he had, throughout his time period, and I've read his book, and yeah, he makes the miracle out as him. It wasn't him as much as he makes it out to be, but it has a him element to it. Not that, oh, he's so smart, or oh, he's such a genius in it. I don't think that. What it was his connection to this gentleman, well, I don't know if we call it this man, Hitler. And partially, the problem is this man, Bormann here. Bormann, as private secretary, basically was the doorkeeper to Hitler. You could not get to see, literally, you could not get to see Hitler without Bormann's approval. Now, of course, Hitler could say, I want to see the general in charge of whatever failing battlefront or something, and obviously they would be brought in. So, Hitler wasn't, without power, without control on it, but if he wanted to see somebody, that person would be brought to see Hitler, whether it was bringing back Rommel to make him a field marshal and go through the, the ceremonies of that, or whatever, that was obviously happening whenever Hitler wanted that to happen. But if you had a problem, you had a situation that you wanted the Fuhrer to decide on, it doesn't get to Hitler without going through Bormann. And so he was the gatekeeper. And as the war went on, as Hitler became more and more isolated, at first here at Berchtesgadens, as well as, especially in the Fuhrer bunker days, he was the controlling person, so he was a bit of the problem. Now, Speer could go and see Hitler anytime he felt like it. He'd just show up. Bormann had no ability of saying, you're not on the schedule, you can't see him. He'd show up for dinner. He's, one of the intimates in the inner circle. Another one of those was Hermann Göring. He as part of the Ober-Salzberg complex here, as it sort of grew, and to my knowledge, that the Hitler element of it was not paid for by Germany, but was paid for out of or even out of party funds. It was not a corruption thing, is my understanding. It was all out of money from selling Mein Kampf and other licensed memorabilia from Hitler that the, if you will, Hitler estate or whatever got a percentage of, is what that was all paid for out of. But Göring had his own place built as part of the complex, so he had his own house there. I don't believe Speer did. But so Goering could obviously show up at his house at any time he felt like it, and basically could invite himself to dinner or whatever if he needed to see Hitler. People like Reeder and Brauhitsch, no, they couldn't. Now, once Hitler's hanging out at the Wolf's Lair and having daily meetings with the Army Command, obviously these guys were seeing Hitler at a routine basis, but they're sort of dealing with how the battle's going today, not other problems. You get back more to Speer. Speer was constantly having problems in that what was a fairly corrupt system was the Gauleiter system. And it was corrupt not always in money, but in power. They had their personal friends. They had their pet projects. And so that there was a lot of duplication of effort or various inefficiencies based on that system. And what Speer was able to do was able to, with the power of Hitler, fight those effectively. Now, he wasn't always winning. It wasn't always an easy win. It was, periodic losses within it, but he was able to do that much more than anybody else could, and even more than Todt could. Todt was a longtime Hitler loyalist, but I don't ever think a friend of Hitler, where Speer really became Hitler's buddy. They'd hang out and talk about architecture. It wasn't, oh, I got a meeting to talk about how building the new Germany. It's, hey, we're talking about fun things, as Hitler saw them, talking about architecture. So Speer was a buddy, not just a reliable political guy, not just a government guy, not just all that stuff. He was a buddy. So he was able to do it more effectively than Todt. I don't know that Speer did show in the building of the Reich's chancellery and whatever that he was a fairly efficient organizer. So I'm not discounting his personal capabilities. I'm just not agreeing with how much he presented himself that it was his personal abilities inside the Third Reich, his book. So that's sort of my assessment of here is some efficiency increased in production, increase in ICs because both of him as a person, his access to Hitler, and the organization, partially of Todt, that he represented and managed. I think it was Milch from the Luftwaffe that was a longtime ally of Speer in all of this armaments production and what to get produced. But even with all of that, and even later on when you had Guderian, after he was sort of dismissed as a field commander, was placed in charge of tank production, and because of internal politics and what was going on, and Speer very much supported Guderian in this, because Guderian wanted to simplify the numbers of and types of tanks being produced. Me, as a guy who likes the intricacies of panzers, doesn't necessarily like all this because we like all the different cool types of tanks, but for war efficiency, it's a bad thing. Well, they sort of broke out that, well, but it says tank production, you're not in charge of heavy tank production. And so, and that was sort of fiddled around, and I forget who it was that sort of got through to Hitler, and I think it was a Bormann associate or something. Oh, no, okay, yeah, Hitler sort of agreed. Yeah, this other guy or whatever, the heavy tanks can still go on because Hitler liked mega projects. And that's sort of how the Maus super heavy tank comes about. Not that Guderian was against the Tiger, and I'm not sure his position on the Tiger too. Not that, they realized that they were facing KV-1s and then the later KV-85s, and realizing that you did need heavy tanks, but the sort of the super heavy monstrosities that Dr. Ferdinand Porsche built, the Maus, some of the other stuff, continued when Guderian wanted the programs canceled because he realized they weren't good for fighting warfare. and another area that Speer had no control over initially and lost control as time went on was to Himmler and Himmler's SS state. That is one of the elements of why I've created some of these things, which is is a way to show the SS state as it grew. They had what is it? Alaric porcelain factory that they built, or they bought. They didn't build. They bought. It was a long line of high-end porcelains, purely commercial enterprise. They moved it to Dachau. Now, realize Dachau has such an evil, ugly name, and it should have an evil, ugly name, but it also had other elements. And yeah, as time went on, more and more the prisoners went on to work in other departments. But I don't know if the porcelain factory was ever run by prisoners. Don't know that it was, because they originally, they bought the factory and had high-end artisans. This was bought it, I think, in somewhere between 36 and 38. Long before that they were doing the final solution, and they wouldn't want to trust the political prisoners to doing that work. And they also had at Dachau the female auxiliary training corps and some other training facilities that had nothing to do with the camp system that people here at Dachau and say it was a complex. And so Himmler sort of did what he wanted to do without the approval or coordination of armaments. A good example of this is the rocketry. You have the sort of the Stalin organ rocket, the Katyusha, which is basically like what you think of as rockets, long, thin rockets with fins on them that are fin stabilized and fly off of rails. Well, the German army, because of the rocket development, I don't think Werner von Braun was the main guy in this, but because of that whole program that they were doing, came up with a spin stabilized rocket that didn't have any fins on it, but just tapped off the little bit of gas. And those rockets were far more accurate, and they were sort of short, stubbier rockets, and much superior to the fin stabilized rockets the Soviets used. The downside is they took cost a lot more to produce. Well, the SS, and I don't know how much Himmler was involved in this, but the SS realized that it would be cheaper to produce the other types of rockets, the ones similar to the Soviets. They're more simplified, and since it was an area effect weapon, you're not firing one or two rockets to hit a machine gun position or something with some artillery rounds. You're trying to blanket the area and either then attack, or if the enemy's starting to develop an attack against you, blanket the area just in front of your lines with just a huge amount of rockets. That was the idea. So being overly accurate was not necessarily useful and maybe even counterproductive. So the SS wanted these cheaper rockets to be built. The problem is they take a different railing system, so you can't fire them out of the same setup. They will require an entirely different logistic system, and so they're counterproductive. Even though they're cheaper, either you convert all over to the fin stabilizer, you keep the standard. Well, because they were an SS program, and I think they were made in factories with prisoners of war and or people that Himmler was going to kill anyways, part of the final solution elements. The SS just went ahead and built them. And part of what, you may go, well, okay, but the SS is demanding a share of metal, explosives, and any other, rare and needed resources out there that even if you were going to have a prisoner of war or a Jewish slave labor force building rockets, it would have been better to build rockets that could use for regular army or for SS units or whatever as the time needed, because the SS is only so big, and if you expand production in the factory even more, well, you have nobody to shoot them because only the SS have the rocket systems to be able to deliver them. So more ammunition, doesn't necessarily help out things because you can only get them to particular divisions. So you have various and so he was able to buck the system and build what the SS wanted to do, even if it hurt the whole thing. So this is part of Germany's problem, is that you have various fiefdoms. Another person, I don't know how well Hitler liked Himmler as a person, though he felt very much until the very end when Himmler surrendered to the Allies, thought he was a super loyal guy. So he was thought of him as a super loyal person, and he had access, plus the general idea of, so what are you going to do about it, kind of thing. That if he sets up a factory, what is Speer going to do? Is he going to send in a bunch of organization personnel to tear the factory down? And when you show up at a mine or a refinery that's making steel or whatever, and say, we want X amount of supplies and here's our requisition orders signed by Himmler, are the local factory managers going to say no, even if they have another order signed by Speer saying only people on the approved list get raw materials? And since he had his own, Himmler had his own labor source, you see how that's going, that there's a lot of these conflicts that were going on, and Speer was the best person at the time to manage them, but he did not have full control, partially because of Hitler's philosophy of divide and rule. Like earlier on, you had the Konstantin Van Nuth here as foreign minister when Ribbentrop was NSDAP foreign minister. One government, one party. Eventually, Konstantin goes to become in charge of Bohemia, Moravia, the Czech, what is today the Czech Republic, and Ribbentrop is put in charge of the foreign ministry. And it was sort of who's doing the better job, and so that was part of Hitler's leadership principles. Who's doing the better job, they will eventually win, and that kind of thing. So that's sort of why and how I've decided to make Speer sort of a bit of an unfair, construction practical delay still has them because it's organization. Todt is still around. You still have a fair amount of resources, partially from organization Todt, partially coming in from Reich Hermann Göring organization. And as the war goes on and on, my understanding, Hermann Göring himself had less day-to-day involvement in Reich Hermann Göring. He was much more focused on the Luftwaffe, or his drug habit, as that got worse and worse. But that, I think, got worse and worse as the war. He escaped into that as much as any addiction problems. But you have the increased IC efficiency and increased ICs and increased supply production from his winning of battles to streamline the production system. And like I'll say it again, it wasn't because no one else thought of the idea of streamlining it. It was just he was the person with enough political power to be able to do this. So you really have to look at the balance of situation here. That I'm doing just because the way I've done it, now it hurts IC efficiency. And maybe we should go over to Canaris here. That hurts leadership. That's something to think about. Canaris, Wilhelm Canaris, head of the Abwehr, was in a constant fight, not so much with Reich Minister of the Interior, Wilhelm Fick. That became less and less of a serious post. With the rise of Heinrich Himmler and Reinhard Heydrich as SS intelligence. And so another good person here would be, maybe we should put in, thinking about this, ruling party support partisan efficiency. Well, part of the reason that I've maintained this negative element to the leadership modifier for Canaris is that there is an ongoing anti-Hitler movement, or if not that, Hitler mitigation movement, or other element. If you have Canaris in charge and he was doing the Abwehr, people like Dietrich Bonhoeffer were found places in the Abwehr, or working for, if not actually in them, but sort of working for them, that were sort of non-cooperative with the state. So that's sort of, yes, I think he was an efficient spy master. They were having failures penetrating Britain particularly. I think they did fairly well in penetrating places like Spain and Portugal and Sweden, as well as general military intelligence within the Reich and everything going on. I think they did fairly well there. But you can look at the competition between British intelligence and SOE. Those were two competitive intelligence agencies. SOE was a little bit more of a guerrilla movement in their plans, but they were also an intelligence gathering faction, and there were fights between those organizations, of types, almost not quite into the idea of literally physical gunfights in the field, but nearly to that point, and that's maybe overstating a little bit, but they were working to counter purposes at times. And what I'm sort of thinking of is British intelligence, shall we say, had a history long before, even World War I started, and was looking to the future, where SOE was looking to win the war. So British intelligence was, well, do we want to support Yugoslav partisans? Aren't they communists? Maybe we shouldn't, because they'd be bad people after the war. Or should we support French communist guerrilla cells, because maybe France will go communist and, in a coup, and become part of the greater Soviet Empire? Maybe we shouldn't support them. Where the SOE was, you want some machine guns to go kill Germans? Here, please give us any, photographs of any construction projects, or, anything going on to help with military intelligence in France, and we'll, pass it on to those who need it. So they were both, trying to create acts of sabotage and gather intelligence with the SOE. But in places, again, in like Yugoslavia or Greece, Ilas and Alas, or whatever, the communist and the non-communist guerrilla forces were fighting each other. And sometimes wasn't really, again, SOE agents, which are sometimes British people and sometimes locals trained by the British, weren't like shooting at British intel agents, but they were supporting groups that sometimes shot at each other, kind of things, is what I mean by this kind of, that it does get to near violence in some cases in the field. Never like in London. They weren't, shooting each other in London, but that there were these conflicts, and there were several major failures of where Germany did penetrate for the long time and fooled SOE in their intelligence gathering. They were saying, oh yeah, we're recruiting these people, and they weren't, and they were give us more information, and so they would send out information of other possible agents, and then the SS would go snap them up, and so the British were failing too. So I don't necessarily think Canaris's failure is particular. I think he was a pretty good leadership, but it just sort of shows a a detriment to the overall organization. Is why I have that there. Now, Reinhard Heydrich was in charge of the SS's intelligence program. It was a competitive program. Again, there were conflicts. I don't know specifically of anything getting to shooting violence between the organizations until the post element of the final Hitler assassination attempt. But they were competitive, and Hitler agreed to the idea of this, that, see who wins. The reason we have Walter Schellenberg here, which goes back to like the Vinlo incident early on that we have the event for, is because potentially Reinhard Heydrich gets assassinated. This is Ausland SD, so this is the foreign intelligence element under Reinhard Heydrich. There was also an internal, which people generally think of as the Gestapo, but there was the internal intelligence element, and sort of under Heydrich you get the sort of the police elements, the internal and external intelligence elements, the Gestapo elements under Reinhard Heydrich. This is much more different than some of the branches that we're dealing with, the camps and the final solutions and other things. So if we want to put Himmler in charge, you get a little more manpower, little less ICs, because I'm taking that as a growing of the SS state, which is productive in that using slave labor, so you get a little more manpower, but it's not cooperating with the overall program. So if you make Himmler more powerful, you get a little bit more disruption there. You get some industrial intelligence, you get some political intelligence, and the terror state continues to grow, so ruling party support is reduced. So if you notice with all of these SS ones, if any of them are in charge of intelligence, and this is different than internal security, Minister of Security, but it just sort of, which is already minusing 4%. And so you can see all of these various elements. 4% isn't a major detriment for popularity, and we could probably afford increasing a little more, so that's what we're probably going to do here, I think, as I'm talking myself into it, talking to you guys. So this shows, because even if, whether it's Reinhard Heydrich or Walter Schellenberg is in charge, still theoretically they're a subordinate of Himmler, so it's growing the SS state. Some of these others have been without specialty titles. We have Martin Bormann already here as a possibility, but that I think was added just by the one of the more standard things, and I don't think really practical, because Bormann wouldn't have done that. I mean, there's a lot more people, whether it's Frick or some of the other NSDAP figures, would be long before I think Bormann would leave. Bormann's power was controlling the access to Hitler. That was Bormann's power, and Bormann did not want to leave that job. And I just don't see him... I see him able to manipulate the system so that he wouldn't be ordered to take the job. There might be a few others that we could put in here, and I even asked at one time about one particular, based on one particular person, and whether, which I'm getting ready to do, whether people play more historically or play more tactical advantage, because one of the people I was putting in wouldn't have been as good as Canaris or like Schellenberg, and I just didn't add him because of that. Because they're all making good game decisions, shall we say. So now, okay, so I've decided to do one of these two. I'm not going to put him learn charges because I don't want to do it's a minor change, but so it does have the help of the manpower. But we don't need that. He's already too busy. 10 intel and intel 10 political. Well, partisan efficiency. We like him as an anti-partisan operation. So we're going to put Reinhard Heydrich. And like I say, Reinhard Heydrich is a very reasonable historical alternative. And again, as I know I've talked, I think earlier just in my long diatribe here, but in other episodes, I don't necessarily take it that Wilhelm Frick was fired from head of the Minister of internal ministry, or that Canaris isn't in charge of the Abwehr, or that Schellenberg isn't in charge of the Ausland SD. No, they're all still doing their jobs. It's just who has the most power, who is sitting at the top of intelligence. All those other agencies are still theoretically there. All those other people are still there. I've thought about, and with I think can be done with Hearts of Iron 4, the new system. They have a new system that no longer has specific slots. They do still have some slots, but some of them are more floating, meaning you can have 3 intelligence guys in some of these fields all at once. What I'm thinking of doing is trying to mod it out so that, at least for the major powers, it won't necessarily look like this, but it won't look like what you've seen in some screenshots that have been released. It'll be somewhere in between, but it will be, and I don't, I know I'm going on a bit long on this episode, but I definitely am planning on building Third Reich events very much for Hearts of Iron 4. That is a definite plan. I just don't know how much structural changes to the game I want to make for an event mod, because I sort of kind of want the event mod, want to get it out there very early, and make all the other modders out there have to deal with it, because all the players will go, hey, this is great, we want this, is this compatible with, so that they'll just build their changes, because there's a lot of different paths you can go on, say ship mods, or something like that, so that I don't know why Third Reich events should conflict with a mod, someone's great mod on there could be 3 different great mods on ships, and you pick the one you want. I still would like everyone who wants to play as Germany to be able to also have Third Reich events. I sort of want it to be as a foundation mod, if you will, and then people who want to do different Air Force mods or whatever, sort of pick and choose, or create eventually maybe like a Black Ice type situation, a comprehensive mod, but even there I want to have Third Reich events as sort of a base that everyone builds on top of, if you will, and they worry about compatibility a little bit more than I worry about compatibility with the plethora of mods that I see to be built for 4 in my mind. But I would like to build a more detailed governmental structure mod, one in which, sort of like we have Chief of Staff, but sort of like Chief of Staff, a Chief of the Army, but also Chief of Army Production, of Army Production, and then Chief of the Navy with Chief of Naval Production, and then Chief of the Air Force with Chief of Air Force Production. And these sort of sub-production people would either be the, shall we say, not the only guy there, but sort of the dominant guy, whether it's tanks or infantry equipment, or whether it's surface warfare, large capital ships or submarines, or like I've been using a lot of small vessel, production bonuses, and Air Force, whether it's bomber production or close air support production or fighter production or whoever, and you can change out some of the production specialties under here, instead of just having an armaments minister, and I've thought about making those under the armaments minister, or however, I don't know. But so you might, whether you have tote or spear, or go back to, why am I blanking on it here? He's still around. Well, so you have like Guderian Inspector der Panzer troops, so if we want to do that, you know, be able to have him also up there. But oh, Schneck. Wilhelm Schneck. That's who I'm looking for here. Yeah, here's Franz Xavier Schwarz. See, Schwarz, Deutsch, that's why I got confused. Like, another NSDAP guy. Ritter von Epp. Why am I not seeing Schneck? He just got fired. He didn't get... Oh no, I did permanently remove him. That's right. But he's still... Nah, when we went over to Goring, I permanently removed him. But he's still theoretically around. And so that, you know, have some sub-level people here. So the idea is that you can have Speer here, and then, you know, Guderian as inspector of tanks, or you could have somebody else as inspector of artillery as the primary focus for army production, and periodically change those people out, you know, limit them so you can't have like everybody. So that's a thought too. But you can make some choices while still keeping some of the top people in charge. And similarly, maybe with intelligence, with a couple of sub people, sort of, you know, build a somewhat of a pyramidal type structure with some of these things that I think, I haven't looked into it yet, but I think you could possibly add slots and move things a bit more easy. But see, if you do that for TRE, you've got to at least do it for the other majors, and that includes countries like France. You know, okay, Portugal, they can stay with their standard government format, trying to build out that whole thing. You know, yeah, I know a few players will play it, but the country, but it's really not necessary. It's the majors to balance it out. They would need theirs and need the research. So I don't know whether that's in the scope of Third Reich events, or whether with that I hook up to a team like the Black Ice team and help promote that up and help work with them on that. I'm very willing. I want to, like I've posted in the forum, very, very happy and really like the contributors to Third Reich events, and I constantly acknowledge them. But it's sort of my mod. I'm keeping it my mod, if you will, keeping ownership of it sort of with me and not as a team. But I'm very happy and willing to work with other teams. I mean, I'm not an egomaniac that has to always be my way or always be my mod. No, it's just with Third Reich events, yes, but other things like when I've worked on Vowert's Panzers, mostly event images for that, but other things like that, very willing to work with teams to get other things achieved, but that are sort of outside the scope of the sort of central Third Reich events. So that's something I'm thinking of doing, because and a lot of it comes from my knowledge of the German political structure, but also I know a little bit about, and don't know all the names and all the players, but there were similar things going on here in the U.S., and Churchill built his coalition government, which had some labor people on it and various things. Now, he was able to keep strong enough control throughout the war, but once partially war fatigue, partially I do think because he brought in labor people that were able to organize. They got him ousted once the war was won, when he lost the next parliamentary elections, though he was later vindicated and brought back into power. So knowing that, and also I've thought about a similar French events mod. I don't know how much good we would do and have for a events mod that covers the French in exile. So there's a bunch of stuff that can be done there, and I am adding a few of events for France to TRE. But I've thought about a mod that could be really interesting that covers 36 through to basically 1940 and deals with the fractured government and fractured society and the various cultural things going on. That could be a very interesting mod to play. It wouldn't, have lots of, there are some operations against some rebels, in North Africa, that kind of thing, but it wouldn't be, very combat-y. It'd be more of how to keep a stable government, how to sort of deal with various political movements in France, and don't know that you'd be able to, the new system has been shown on Hearts of Iron 4. You can turn countries like France into a fascist or into a communist government, and they will change their flags and all that, and I have a little ambivalence about that because I'm a bit more of a history player and that, but I sort of, France is one of those countries that was teetering on the brink, not anywhere near as close, because obviously it did go to civil war in Spain, and there was no near peasantry like there was in Spain, serfdom type things in Spain, as there wasn't anything like that in France. So I don't really know that it was coming that close to going communist or fascist. But still, whether you try to sort of clamp down on various political movements without maybe going to either extreme, to allow for more war production and allow for more readiness to fight the oncoming threat of the Nazis on the one hand, but with doing that could cause, maybe revolts or something out, or just simply political fracturing, which without any, provinces in revolt, but demonstrations and that kind of thing. So if you clamp down too hard and build too many armaments and too much war preparation, you might get other problems that would shut it all down and actually make, in the long run, France weaker, versus do the popular front, do the sort of all-inclusive, give the people what they want while still trying to eke out some war production readiness kind of thing. I've thought about that. That would be a very interesting mod. I just don't know how many people would want to play it, whether they just want to play, Germany, Britain, Japan, US, and Italy. Those are where I definitely want to make country mods like TRE. France is just sort of, I think I have a really good idea, but I just don't know how popular it would be, because I really think I can make some mods like TRE for some of the other majors that would make playing the peace so much more interesting, and make even playing the war more interesting and challenging, all based on history. And I've had thoughts on all the countries on how to do that, with Britain, with outbreaks of, a little more realistic, a little less, what's that, 10% of India or more all breaking out into here, but little things appearing in the tribal territories, or various areas in the outback of the African colonies, or trouble between the Jews and the Arabs in Palestine at the time, or the Golden Circle in Iraq. All that stuff that could make playing Britain very interesting, above and beyond just its involvement in World War II, which is very interesting. So I have a lot of these ideas in my mind, and I want to build, and if I can just get eventually a little support from Paradox once they get Hearts of Iron 4 out, which obviously is their focus now, but I think could be built, and I think could make an excellent game that, as you can tell, I'm a huge war gamer. I'm a huge detailed war kind of guy and dealing with World War II, but I'm also a sort of political type person that's dealing with the cultural, social, and political elements at the time. It's a combination of I'm an anti-Bolshevik and a don't read Cyrillic, so trying to do stuff for Russia's just somewhere between not terribly interesting to me and sort of hard to access. Japan has always fascinated me, so I can do something there, and I had 3 years of Japanese language in high school, though I don't remember most of it by now, but it's a little more accessible, even though it's to me than the Cyrillic writing in Russian is stuff, so I can do a Japanese mod. My opinion, much easier than I can do a Soviet mod. Okay, just my thoughts. Thanks for viewing. Thanks for liking the videos. I'd love to hear your comments either on my ideas for the future or whatever else, and I really like your input. I know people have been giving me suggestions for other games to play. I am looking at some additional stuff. I like your suggestions. Whether I do them or not, I don't know, but quite honestly, the more people suggest a particular game, the higher it rises in possibility. Just so you know, I know we didn't get very much of the talk for most of this episode, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to get played, but more likely to be played if there's a lot of interest in it, that kind of thing. So suggest away. I'm happy with suggestions, and yeah, I'd love to play everything and do all this with all the stuff, but comes down to time. Time to do these episodes, time to do the mods that I want to build. I don't know, right now I think the mods are more popular than the channel. And I've sort of backed off. I'm still going to do at least one more major improvement to TRE, and maybe two, but at least one more major to TRE for Hearts of Iron 3 and Black Ice. But eventually need to move over to 4 and doing a lot of that. So I'm not going to play 10 different games all at once on a daily basis. You could play one episode a week of 10 different games. That can be done, but that isn't probably enough to hold people's interest over a long period of time, especially a long form game, because that's only 52 episodes a year or something. So, but definitely I like suggestions on either what to play or what to do. Thanks a lot. See you next time.